not just women are in danger, but all marginalized people, where being uniquely different right now might truly be considered a crime. It seems as though we had all slipped into a false sense of comfort, that justice would prevail and that good would win in the end. Well, good did not win this election, but good will win in the end. So what today means is that we are far from the end. Today marks the beginning of our story. The revolution starts here. The fight for the right to be free, to be who we are, to be equal. Let's march together through this darkness, and with each step, know that we are not afraid. That we are not alone. That we will not back down. That there is power in our unity, and that no opposing force stands a chance in the face of true solidarity. And to our detractors that insist that this march will never add up to anything,
Bostonred here with Friday Java, a weekly magazine of political theory, polling, and commentary. It is part of the history called people that make up this fascinating journey. We are part of the Obama network. For that, we make no apologies. What we pledge to do is give you the facts on a bridge to history, what body politics is, the most up-to-date theories of political science and psychology. Stay tuned for this incredible ride. Bostonred, peace out.
From WBRN Radio in Boston and on the Bostonred Network, this is Friday Jobber on the 15th of December 2017. We are halfway through the month of December as we move towards 2018. This weekend we'll have Numbers, Man. That's our macroeconomic program here on WBRN Radio and the Bostonred Network. We had a special presentation of this week on the last news conference of Dr. Janet Yellen, and we covered it. You can find that particular broadcast at Numbers Man on many of the outlets here, including Spreaker, iHeart. It's on YouTube under the Numbers Man logo. We'll also have an open source report coming this weekend, and This Week in Economics also. We separated the two in sort of an editorial thing that we thought perhaps one time we would just have one broadcast, but we used two because we need to lay out what the Fed's policy is, will be, I should say, in 2018, and where the economy in 2017. We'll have a summary at the end of the year. There's some end-of-the-year programming coming up. We also will work on a Happy Christmas program, which will talk about progress that was made in the year of 2017. And a wrap-up before a New Year's Eve program, I suppose. Jerry Pippin, our late partner, used to do that particular one in a New Year's show. So that has fallen upon us, at least temporarily here. We'll look first at the tax bill. This is the one the Republicans have been hailing as, quote-unquote, the first victory for DJ Trump. Well, DJ Trump hasn't had much to as LBJ would say, a crow about. But no doubt he is crowing about something. This is from the Washington Post. A number of actors that are coming in here. Marco Vegas Rubio, he's a senator from Florida. He threatened, according to this particular thing by Jeff Stein, Erica Weiner, and Mr. Paletter. Anyway, the $1.5 trillion bill, unless it expands the child tax credit to millions of working families, leaving leaders in the GOP searching. Along with Mike Lee, he's from Utah, wants Republican leaders to include the expansion as a reconciliate. This is the process, separate measures passed by the House and Senate, working to craft a final compromise that could be passed by both chambers next week. Said they believe they can reach a broad agreement that both chambers can pass. They plan to unveil the package this morning with hopes of voting next week. Rubio said it's imperative the GOP make plans more generous for working families. He's probably thinking about his reelection, but he was just reelected. I understand that this is a process of give and take, especially when there's only a couple of us fighting for it. Leverage is less, Rubio said in the Senate on Thursday. Individual Republican senators have significant influence over the plan as the party works to move through the Senate while holding a narrow 52 to 52 seats, and they need 50 to pass this. So in other words, if one person decides not to go along with the plan, they can bring in the Vice President Pence to break a tie, but that's a big problem. Bob Corker, he's from Tennessee, who voted against the Senate version of the bill because it projected additional deficits. Said he's reviewing the final version, but is expected to oppose it. If he opposes it and Rubio comes through, it is a dead duck, period. Top Republican expressed hope that Rubio could be won over. The Finance Committee chair, Orrin Hatch, he's from Utah. We're concerned about it, but we've got to deal with the art of the doable. I think we can resolve the problem. Anyway, who knows? Rubio is seeking would add additional tens of billions of dollars in the new tax brackets for millions of low income and working families squeezed by squeezing negotiators as they struggle to pass the act. Hatch said the party was considering a plan that would shorten the duration of the bill. Plan tax cuts for individuals, a change that would cut the measure's overall tax breaks for individual and working for middle class and working families. The one takeaway in this entire bill is that the pain of it will fall upon the quote unquote middle class and the working class. Under the Senate version, the plan, many of the cuts and credits for individuals are set to phase out in 2025, but Republicans consider moving the expiration date to 2024. Doesn't make any difference at all, basically speaking. Republicans have said the expiring tax cuts for families and individuals would effectively extend by a future Congress. Well, they have to apply to certain budgetary rules to get to 50 votes. Period. The Republican plan would increase the tax credit from $1,000 under existing law to $2,000 to Rubio, and want the extended to additional benefits who pay payroll tax and who do not make enough to owe any tax. So that's sort of like the earned income tax credit we're seeing a play out here. Frustrated by counteroffers, Rubio told party leaders Wednesday night he planned to vote against the plan. Tim Scott, he's from South Carolina, one of the conferees, intervened in a bid to keep Rubio negotiating, and an effort continues there on Scott's behalf. But the problem is that Rubio stands by, quote-unquote, his principle. It is gone. Rubio and Lee proposed funding the expanded credit by slightly shrinking the plan's proposed cuts to corporate taxes from the 20% to evidently from a 20% to evidently just below 21%. Current law is at 35%. So in other words, corporations are getting anywhere from a 15 to 14% plan. Republican leaders say they need to keep the corporate tax at 20% to help companies compete globally, which is actually false. Republican leaders have tentatively agreed to move the rate to 21%, but that doesn't go. A correction here, let's see, Rubio, who noted that negotiators have found a way to fund other proposed changes to the plan. In an earlier version, he was quoted beginning, my concern is that if you found money to lower the top rate was incorrectly attributed to Mike Lee. It doesn't matter that much where they go. Let's quickly to Tillerson. Tillerson is the Secretary of State, and he has been under fire by Trump supporters and at times DJ Trump himself. And his foreign policy is more based upon what we'll term Wilsonian foreign policy, which has been out there for a very, very long time. The negotiation with the Democratic Republic of Korea to withdraw from the Paris Climate Accord and planning to move the embassy to Jerusalem from Tel Aviv, which most of the world opposes. There is a congressional law built in from Bill Clinton's administration that every 6 months the president has to sign off on this. Nonetheless, he is the former, this is Rex Tillerson, Minister of State, the former chief of ExxonMobil. A senior official said foreign diplomats and leaders often ask if Tillerson is speaking for the administration when he and when will he depart? Another aide said White House officials, diplomats, and other secretaries largely deem the former executive Exxon irrelevant. Well, perhaps so, but he is still there. He is the face of the diplomatic corps, even as he remains in the job of the CIA director Mike Pompeo, for example, may no longer be the leading choice because it means he would not brief Trump every day, and the president likes him in that role. I guess he simplifies things. Who knows? Anyway, State Department spokesman said Tillerson enjoys a strong relationship with the president. Well, that's very tenuous. His former person on The Apprentice assumed that she had a relationship too, and she was literally, according to reports in the Wall Street Journal and elsewhere, escorted out of the White House. Her email account shut down, her credentials taken away, and she was screaming and ranting and raving at old General Kelly, which she denied, said she actually resigned. Oh well, so she goes. She was the face of African American in the administration. I suppose now it's up to who is that? Oh, Gentle Ben. President's views on North America have not changed. North Korea acting in unsafe manner, etc. Well, so Tillerson knew that he was contradicting Trump. Well, Tillerson officially speaks for the United States in its foreign policy until DJ Trump removes him. I told Rex Tillerson, our wonderful Secretary of State, that he's wasting his time to try to negotiate with Little Rocket Man. He used to be known as Rocket Man. Trump wrote, using a favorite insult for the leader, Kim Jong-un. Save your energy, Rex. We'll do what has to be done. Well, this policy is silly, period. He will attend a UN Security Council session on the Democratic Republic of Korea on Friday. He will be there. And it makes me angry. The person said of the president's behavior towards Tillerson, describing Trump as impulsive and Tillerson as a patrician Boy Scout, to whom have never going to get along. The two are never get along. Well, no doubt it's compulsive, but that's the end of that story right there. Rex Tillerson continues to struggle. Yeah, let's see here. Roy Moore. I guess we'll bring Roy Moore. We'll have some comments from Judge Moore. He did a little 4-minute YouTube. We'll put that on the week, but that'll be on tomorrow night. After losing the special primary, Judge Moore has yet to concede to Doug Jones, who has been proclaimed the victor by no other than DJ Trump. He lost by 20,715 votes, as it's not and is not in a position to automatically trigger a recount. The margin between Moore and Jones is 1.5%. 0.5% will trigger one. He did not get that. Jones has received no form of support from the Republican Party of Alabama. I didn't think he expected to do that. The Secretary of State, Merritt, who sided with Jones's campaign during several election controversies, said the election will be certified on the 28th of December. But at the same time, the office has brushed off conspiracy theories promoted by pro-Moore sites. So several have been out there. One, that African American voters were caught trying to vote with fake IDs. More than 90% of African American voters selected Jones. Merritt's office confirmed there was no actual reports of any kind of behavior. And another promoted site called Big League Politics suggested that the election night count, in which the urban Mobile and Jefferson County came in last, putting Jones in the lead, was suspicious of the election. The final days Moore's campaign had cited as an inaccurate Big League story to claim that women who accused Moore of his sexual activities were found by someone named Tim Miller, who was a Republican operative. Big League also shared a rumor that went virtual, posted by a Gateway Pundit, a conservative group, by someone that said Democratic activists are calling on African American voters in Mississippi, Georgia, South Carolina to travel to Alabama to vote for the far left-wing candidate Jones. Well, Jones is not far left. He's a moderate Democrat, as espoused by Senator Meacham of West Virginia, and he would know. So this is somebody called Warren for President. This is on Reddit. Behind the post confirmed it was intended as an obvious troll. No doubt about that. But there were some interesting machinations in that particular election. I recall on election night we were looking at the mass deficits there, and we decided that Judge Moore had won the race. It was early in the situation, but Jones was behind by 40,000 votes. And that is usually a significant situation to make up. And what we did not do was kind of clumsy. We didn't check on the urban areas, the urban counties. We had the statistics there to see how many votes were out of those counties and how many were left over. Evidently what happened was there were a lot of votes left over there. And also one of the things that virtually no one, I'm not sure if anyone did, model. We did not at our Ouija board, nor with our slide rule model. The write-in votes that Senator Selby brought up, there was 22,000 of those out there that wrote in someone else. Anyway, that is something, since Alabama is not keeping any digital prints, that will disappear. Definitely they will check the military votes, but the military votes are not going to overcome this. Nor the provisional ballots, they usually don't. We found that situation when we were trying to get recounts on the presidential election in Wisconsin and in Michigan. Never got off the ground in Michigan. And also Michigan and Wisconsin. and that was paid for by our candidate, Jill Stein's campaign. But nowhere do you go. It's usually a very, very difficult situation to use quote-unquote provisional ballots to overcome a deficit. It's usually very, very difficult to overcome a deficit. Anyway, one of the elections I can think of that it was overcome, and we predicted it correctly, was the first election of Al Franken. Al Franken was elected, and by roughly 300 votes and change. He was behind in the initial count, but succumbed in the recount, and once he was ahead by 340, whatever it was, precise number, there was no looking back. That was the end of that. Mr. Franken went on to the Senate. So that is sort of where that particular situation is. Let's go to our last item here. Evangelists, evangelicals. This is out of Pasadena, California, where they have the Rose Bowl parade. They have all decided they want to become preachers and enrolled in a seminary to learn how to do it. They are in a seminary called Fuller. Fuller Theological Seminary is known for evangelicals from the Midwest, the South, and the Northwest. They come to the Fuller operation. Debates intensified last year when DJ Trump was elected. This is from the Washington Post by Sarah Pulliam Bailey. And it was on the 14th of December. Debate intensified. We got all that with Roy Moore, even two of the grandchildren of the famed evangelical Billy Graham, who popularized the term of banning the word. The term has come to represent white Republicans and sometimes closed-mindedness and a superiority. That's from his granddaughter, Jeriah Armfield, a writer and pastor's wife in South Carolina. Jean Hatmaker, a Texas-based author with a large evangelical following, sees a mass exodus from a label in her community. The term feels irrelevantly tainted, and those of us who don't align with the current misunderstood description are distancing ourselves to preserve our consciousness. At Princeton, the campus group changed its decade-old name this year from the Princeton Evangelical Fellowship to simply Princeton Christian Fellowship. What the difference? I have no idea. The term evangelical became popularized a decade ago as a way to trump down differences, emphasizing all people under an umbrella, regardless of denomination, agreed to embrace the Bible and spread the word. Politicians as Trump and Moore have shown how elusive shared faith and values are today. Evangelicals make up a huge portion of the American population, 1/4 of the country. An increasing number of Latino Christians are coming to describe themselves as evangelical. We saw that happening in places like Honduras under the fascist Rio Montt, and various other American fascistic evangelicals in that area of the hemisphere. While white evangelicals numbers have been shrinking, with surveys suggesting a decline between 2 and 6%, not very much, over a decade, 10 years. And it, too, is soon to say that the demographic data to what Trump's effect might have changed, the degree to which it might have changed the identity of evangelicals. The Fuller Seminary, palm tree-lined campus, as other major evangelical institutions across the country debate the term, especially amongst younger members. When I say I'm an evangelical now, I always qualify it. Jones said, reporting that 80% of European evangelicals voted for Trump. That's an offensive statistic for me, and something I feel obligated to apologize for. I don't want to be connected to that. Jones and other students there at the place for African American Christians who share those four beliefs, and those core beliefs here fully embrace four tenets, many of which people who never call themselves evangelical differences come down to self-described evangelicals. Somewhere earlier we saw obedience to the Bible as the ultimate authority, belief in the sacrifice of JC on the cross as a source of salvation, the necessity of a personal born-again conversion experience, and a work to spread the gospel, according to them. Anyway, that is basically Savannah Sturgeon, excuse me. I really am not ready to give up the term evangelical, whatever, as they say. The Pew survey, we talked about this, expressed a greater approval than for every religion. Americans express more positive feelings towards all religions except evangelicals. The Catholics, the Jews, and the mainline Protestants, Mormons, Muslims, atheists, and more except evangelicals stayed at a flat 61% of approval. I'm surprised they'll be above that. But term evangelical has helped parents comb through book categories, ministries such as World Vision, and various others received the bulk of their donations from evangelicals. Book publishers here in Varsity, I don't know who they are, but anyway, such as Liberty University there and Wheaton College draw primarily from evangelicals. That's the Liberty College there. Farwell Jr. is still there. Unlike the Catholics, the evangelical have no central authority, period, nor do the Islamic people. In the 60s and 70s, the evangelical movement behind progressive causes in Canada, Jimmy Carter described himself as a born-again. I remember when he ran. And some of the born-agains actually fell on his bandwagon. Support for Trump is not a departure from several decades of evangelical political behavior, that is, from Heap Carter, a historian at Valparaiso University. The reality is that evangelicals have been willing to look past, if not outright embrace, questionable behavior and tactics in candidates they support. We talked about this the other night. He points to evangelical support for Ronald Reagan, who was divorced and didn't attend church. Now, Reagan was not a churchgoer. In fact, Reagan was more an agnostic than anything else. But from Emmett Price, a professor who focuses on African American studies at a prominent seminary, Gordon Conwell in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, said he worries that European evangelicals abandoning the term are only looking to avoid a negative association there. He's concerned that politics has tarred the evangelicals as racist, no doubt, but they can continue on as something else. At Fuller, the president there, Mark Laberton, says students used to be more willing to stay within the bounds of the broad tenets of evangelicalism and hash out the differences. You could say I'm an evangelical and I'm part of the religious right. I'm an evangelical and I'm not part of the religious right. He said in the Reagan era, people would have understood that the two things are separate. I think that's changed with the 87% of European evangelicals voting for DJ Trump. Well, what has happened is the evangelical movement, European Christian evangelical movement, has turned more from a quote-unquote religious organization to a secular organization. In other words, they are the stormtroopers for the alt-right, the white supremacists primarily, and the conservative far-right backbone of the country. These social issues they use are just a magnet, such as abortion. When we play Judge Moore's tape tomorrow, you'll hear that nationalizing as killing children. That's one of their favorite situations. But they never talk about the economy, the way it's set up. Most of them do not. And that children are dying of malnutrition. The Children's Health Care Act not being reenacted. Those are the kinds of things that harm children much more than the low rate of abortions. First of all, with birth control pills, etc., there are very few abortions done in the U.S. Very, very few indeed. And that is a question out there. And then he went into things like gender roles being reversed and that sort of thing. Well, the problem there is in Australia, and we will get a program on that, just passed in their parliament the same-sex marriage law. And it passed overwhelmingly. They had a national plebiscite on it. The plebiscite won overwhelmingly also. So the world has changed, and in the U.S., major corporations have recognized same-sex couples, transgenders, etc. It is a business situation. You saw it coming out in Alabama, where the business community there was very worried about Roy Moore because they had people like Mercedes there, and they want to bring on other global manufacturers, and they didn't want to be embarrassed, period. And I think that's probably one of the reasons behind Richard Selby talking about the write-in campaign, and the Republicans got it. 22,000 of them. Had not been for that, old Roy Moore would have been riding his horse, or his horse would have been traveling to Washington so he could ride it. Or maybe he got a new horse, who knows. But that's one of the things going on. We'll go now to Professor Amaritz. He is at the writing in the crystal ball, and then we'll do the sports. Here we go. This is partial gerrymandering, partisan gerrymandering, sorry about that, and the outlook for the 2018 House election by Professor Alan Amowitz. He's at the Emory University, at least he was. There's a growing sense among political observers that the U.S. may be heading towards a wave election in 2018. In our opinion, it's too early for that. Results of special elections, including Doug Jones in Alabama on Tuesday with Democratic victories. Well, New Jersey has more or less, except some aberrations, been a Democratic state. Now, they did elect Tuton Christie and Christine, what was her name? Anyway, I can't remember her name now. She was so-called moderate Republican, but Christie was a flamethrower, as old man McConnell would say. And in Virginia, surprisingly large Democratic gains in Virginia's House of Delegates all point towards the likelihood of a significant Democratic gains next year in the midterm elections. The result of recent generic ballot polling generally shows Democrats leading. We have never at the Ouija board put a lot of stock in generic ballots. They are just that generic. Despite signs of impeding a Democratic wave, however, there are many political experts that believe the way House districts are drawn, and no doubt about that, caused significant but difficult for Democrats to gain enough seats to take back the House. According to this argument, Republicans' gerrymandering was so effective that Democrats would need to win the national popular vote by a very large margin, perhaps 8 points or more, in order to gain at least 24 seats needed. It would be very, very difficult. In order to test the argument and evaluate the large margin Democrats would need in the popular vote to win, I conducted a regression analysis of the impact of the Democratic share in major party votes on the number of Democratic seats in the House for 36 House elections between 1946 and 2016. Additional Democratic share of national popular vote, I included one predictor, the number of seats, a dummy variable there. And anyway, Republicans enjoyed complete control in Florida, in Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Virginia, and Wisconsin. Well, no doubt Boss Walker is there, and he is ready. I won't go into the model, but what we will say is shows us the simple two variables the model explains, and almost 90% of the variance in the Democratic seats. This is between 46 predicted seats. This is the share at 46. If the Democrats get a 46% share of the vote, Before 2011, it was would be 192. After that, they only get, because of gerrymandering, 171 seats. That's where we are now. Now, if the Democrats were to win 54%, let's do 50%. Before, they would get 225 seats, and that's before 2011. And after 2011, 204 seats. You can see how the gerrymandering immediately took out 21 seats. Now, if they are lucky enough to score 51%, which would be phenomenal, 230, they would have received 234 in 2011, before 2011, and then it goes down 11 seats to 213. But if they go over 51%, say for instance they get 52%, they would get 240. They would have gotten 234. I'm getting carried away here. And after 211, they would receive 213 seats. So that would be how it would go. And if we look back at this, as to where the Democrats would need to get. We were looking at this just a minute ago here. This is 36 elections. We don't really need to do that. They need to get 24 seats. That was the optimal amount. So thus, let's see. They would have to roughly score, 53 seats? 229. It's way up there. 54%. So, in other words, the impact tables compared based on when the Democrats were winning between 49 and 54%. Based on this results, it is more difficult today to win than before 2011. No doubt about that. Jeff explained, regaining control of the House in 2012, despite winning, they won 50.6, not enough. Period. So, in other words, the Democratic Party is set to literally perform roughly 55% to get back in. So some of the sources here, generic ballot, we won't get into this, is 18 predicted Democrat share of vote. Their generic ballot plus 2, the Democrat predicted would be 51%. They would gain 19 seats. They would get 213. But they have to be basically about a plus 8 and get 52.4% to gain 30 seats. They only need 24 to get there. So in other words, they have to be basically a good 5 to 6 plus on the generic ballot to win anything. So this is Professor Amowitz and his situation. Yesterday we had a program, Tyba Smiley, the long-serving host of the PBS program called Tyba Smiley, produced by his own production company. PBS has vanished Tabas from their network distribution. We go into it, what occurred there. He was evidently not afforded due process. Only after the lawyers entered, they interviewed him for 3 hours. It was written up in Variety. If you go to that broadcast, you'll have it. And there's also a statement there by Travis himself where he talks about what happened. But on the 13th of December, Variety talked about it in detail. Tavis Smiley suspended. I thought he was completely vanished for good, but I suppose he was suspended. They suspend the distribution of it. This thing, folk are going to court, no doubt about it. Tavis Smiley pledges to keep on fighting, period, and his TS Media production company there. Excuse me. There was an article written in February in The Observer by his former producer, a guy named Jock. I forget the rest of his name. But anyway, nonetheless, this thing has been around for a while. It's taken on some currency. But it took until this bandwagon effect, what we call modern-day McCarthyism. The same thing happened to Garrison Aquila, and he was banished from the Minnesota Public Radio there. And he got the lawyers involved, so they are working on something. I noticed today, I was looking at their local newspaper, Garrison has slipped back. In effect, he had a little article, he had a pacemaker installed at one of the institutions, and thus he reappeared in an article in the local paper, and because I suppose it was on his situation. Now, I'll just start out just a little bit of it, not very much. Just what they said, longtime host, author Garrison Keillor was terminated by the Minnesota Public Radio last month for unspecified inappropriate behavior with a colleague. The Washington Post discontinued his syndicated columns soon after, citing failure to disclose his situation before writing an article defending Senator Franken. On Wednesday, he submitted to the Star Tribune the following column, and we thought readers would find it interesting. Coming to St. Mary's Hospital in Rochester, I'm surrounded by men and women in blue who did well in high school math and chemistry, and here I am. Among those writing limericks and parodies, and barely made it to graduation, depending on Science for Survival. It's awkward for a gent of 75. He's 75 years old, and used to look down on science nerds as dull and unimaginative. Now I am grateful for their confidence. I'm here for an implant of a pacemaker. Yeah, you like to use the infinitive. Well, anyway, my heart, let's see what it is here. My heart, having decided to sometimes hesitate 3.8 seconds between beats, and at 5 you faint, oh boy, and fall down banging your head on the desk. So I got out of my suit and tie and into a gown and lie on a gurney and wheeled into the surgical prep room. I had bought a paper and pen, that's when he was writing there, and the nurse was named Kim, who had been fussing with tape and an IV saying, you're going to be sedated. You know when? As of 5 minutes ago. So they'd already stuck the needle in him. He was writing his little thing there. A cardiac nurse named Kim said, the chances of failure are slim. You're not going to die. And she pointed to the sky. And no patient ever wrote those lyrics before. She is impressed. It's beautiful, being sedated. I am cognizant of people around, voices, that's what happens. Meredith did the anesthesia and said it won't lead to amnesia. But this sedation may cause a constipation. We recommend milk of magnesia, and I won't go into the rest of it, but basically that was it. And there have been many standard form of limericks. Is a stanza, 5 lines, the first, second, and a fifth rhyming one another, having 3 feet and 3 syllables each, and the short and the third line also rhyming. That's something Ray Charles talked about that once. rap music very similar to that, as far as I know. Practitioners of it, George Bernard Shaw, one that knew how to write, no doubt. And it basically is a humorous, it's folkish, and evidently something Garrison Keillor had been doing for a very, very long time. And also from that paper, while we're here, the state's attorney in the case of Justine Denard, she is the woman killed in the upper Midwest state of Minnesota, going out of her own backyard in her night clothes, checking on a suspicious situation. She was shot across the chest by a police officer. The county attorney said Wednesday that he does not yet have enough evidence to file charges against the police officer in Justine Demond. Did I say Denard? Demond. The murder of Justine Denard. The officer there, Mohammed Noor, to decide if he was justified. Hadn't heard much from him. But anyway, this is a live situation. We'll have this as we come in, actually. Denard's Demond's family was deeply distressed and unhappy following Freeman's remarks, said Bob Bennett. He is the attorney representing the family. We expected a quality investigation. It would be fair, complete, and accurate. And apparently that hasn't happened. The attorney for the Mr. Noor, Thomas Pluckett, said he was concerned about Freeman's comment. No lawyer wants their client placed on their Christmas tree as a present to a vocal segment of the community. Was probably a little more than that. Pluckett said, that said, this case is about an officer following procedure and training, which is a lie. Investigators gather evidence. They don't create it. That is their job. I'm concerned about any supplemental investigation, especially if it is directly overseen and influenced by the state's attorney. The video of his remarks was taken at a Christmas party, and the group that coalesced around another person murdered by that police organization, Jamar Clark, who was shot and killed there. There was no struggle involved there. Anyway, Sam Sanchez, who was part of the group, made the video, and Freeman was talking as being recorded. He said he probably didn't know it was being recorded, but anyway, he was recorded. Fair question, and you'll hear from Mr. Freeman, and we'll have more on this as it develops. This will do it for us. We'll see you on... Oh, oops, I'm sorry about that. We need to do the sports. I'm getting a little bit carried away here. We will do the sports, if we're lucky. We'll go to the National Basketball League. The Pistons were at the Hawks. Pistons of 105-91. The Knickerbockers at the Nets. Crosstown rivals, basically. Knicks 111-104. The Lakers and Cavaliers in Cleveland. The Lakers 112 and the Cavaliers 121. Mr. James was at his best. The Kings and T-Wolves in Minnesota. T-Wolves 119-96. And finally, the Mavericks and Warriors out in California. Warriors 112-94. This will do it for us. We'll see you on the week that was on Saturday morning.